This is our fourth dinner to honor and support UNICEF. Each time we have doubled the attendance. We will have all of Atlanta here in 12 years. In the past 12 months, 3.5 million children have not died due to vaccine-preventable diseases or diarrhea, according to UNICEF. Mark Russell says he likes to get his war news from people who have names like General Walter Boomer and Wolf Blitzer. But I like to get my news about child survival from people who have names like Jim Grant and Miss Audrey Hepburn and Larry Bruce. Jay Leno has raised the possibility that the Hubble telescope may be perfect and that the universe may be fuzzy. Well, the world for a long time saw the death of children as being normal, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau in 1762 said, "Half of all children will die by the age of 8. This is nature's law, do not contradict it." But because some people thought that the world was not fuzzy, that it was our vision that was fuzzy, this has all changed, and the last year has been extraordinary. The Children's Summit was a time of pageantry, but a time of promise, and it was a watershed event for child survival. And now 80% of the children of the world have been touched by immunization. And while we may still have some cases this year, the fact is the last known case of polio in this hemisphere took place on September 23rd, 1990. I'd like you to meet a few of the people who are links in this human chain that made it all happen. And Jim Grant is the most responsible. He's made UNICEF a responsive organization that's changed the world. How has he done it? First of all, UNICEF has forced us to look at the problem. Grizzly bears are not very sociable, and yet you've seen on television where 2 or 3 or 4 dozen will be around a river at the annual salmon run. Why does this happen? Because they don't look at each other. As soon as grizzly bears look at each other, they have to confront each other, they have to react, and so they don't look at each other. UNICEF has made us look at the faces of children, and we have had to respond. But UNICEF has also made sure that the world has stayed organized at an international level, but at a village level, so that society has been mobilized, and UNICEF gives you your money's worth. When I was in college, I had a bet with my roommate on who could spend the least amount of money per date for an entire semester. I was down to 9 cents per date. I lost that bet, but I would not even be in competition with UNICEF. These are cheap people. They have measles vaccine down to 10 cents a dose. They have polio vaccine down to 5 cents a dose. Diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus, all 3 of them for 4 cents a dose. The results are beyond belief. The Vietnam War Memorial is less than a football field in length. But if you were to place the names of the children saved by these programs in the last 12 months on a similar wall, that wall would extend over 3 miles.
The Task Force for Child Survival, established in 1984 and headquartered at the Carter Center, has been a true leader in the effective achievement of universal child immunization, saving literally millions of children from death and impairment. UNICEF and the United States Committee for UNICEF are deeply grateful to President and Mrs. Carter, and it is a great honor to express that gratitude and to acknowledge that leadership tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, President Jimmy Carter.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, as you would certainly imagine or perhaps know, being president of the greatest nation on earth gives that chosen leader an opportunity to do a lot of things, sometimes mistaken, sometimes in doubt, but sometimes very gratifying and charged with wisdom. 14 years ago, I took one of those actions that has proven to be perhaps the wisest decision I ever made, when it was my responsibility or prerogative as president to choose the man, the person to fill the role of the head of UNICEF, and I chose Jim Grant, and I'm very grateful to Jim that 14 years later he's still doing this job. You might think that my main envy was toward George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or Andrew Jackson or Harry Truman or President Roosevelt. But that was not the case. Early in my life, not too long ago, my main envy was of Humphrey Bogart, and Sean Connery, and Jim Grant's cousin, Cary Grant, because they were on the screen with an idol of mine that I admired and loved at a distance. And that's why I'm up here tonight. And you might think that being nominated and then inaugurated president was one of the high points of my life. It was, but another high point of my life is tonight to be able to recognize an absolutely remarkable person who has endeared people in this country, in Europe, and indeed throughout the world, with her quiet beauty, her acting talent, and later on, within the last few years, a remarkable dedication to improve the lives of children throughout the world. When she was only 15 years old, as Larry Bruce just mentioned, Audrey Hepburn was a recipient of food and support and encouragement and warmth and love and care from UNICEF when she was one of the survivors of the Second World War in Europe. And during the succeeding years of her life, she had a notable career. Only 4 years after that, when she was still a teenager, as a matter of fact, she was a star on Broadway. She's promoted UNICEF and the care of children in many countries. And she's not only just been to the nice places, like Australia or New Zealand or Japan or London or Paris or Atlanta or Copenhagen, but she's been in some of the places that most of us would not want to go. We hear about the devastating human rights violations and the death on the streets, the murder of priests in El Salvador. She's been there. Last December, the Carter Center gave its annual Human Rights Award to very courageous people who fought against human rights violations in Guatemala. And she's been there. Year before last, Rosa and I spent 20 days negotiating in Atlanta and later in Nairobi to try to end an almost indescribably horrible war in Ethiopia between the Ethiopian government and the Eritrean People's Liberation Movement, and between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray People's Liberation Movement. She's been in Ethiopia and Addis Ababa, and she's been in Eritrea, and she's been in Tigray. Later, Rosa and I spent 6 days trying to bring peace to Sudan, a country torn apart by internecine war based on religious conflict, with a fundamentalist Muslim government in Khartoum and Christians and others in the south, in one of the most heart-rending losses of life on earth. In 1988, 260,000 people died in Sudan alone. We hardly knew about it, but Audrey Hepburn knew about it. and she's been there. To hold children in her arms, to support the programs of UNICEF, and to let the world know that this is a cause worthy of the support of us all. And it's a great honor for me tonight to present the Child Survival Award for 1991 to a woman that I've admired and come to respect and even to love, Audrey Hepburn. Audrey, would you please come forward?
Thank you. Thank you, UNICEF Atlanta. I thank the Carter Center. I thank Atlanta, dear, dear Atlanta, for this wonderful honor. I'm deeply grateful and very, very touched. And I'm especially honored to receive this beautiful gift from your hands, Mr. President, who together with Mrs. Carter are dedicating your lives, your energy, and your prayers, not only to your country, but to all of humanity. All the world loves a child, or so the saying goes. But for too long, the reality has been very different. At the World Summit for Children, Secretary General Pérez de Cuellar stated, "This World Summit represents a commitment at the highest level to build a world order that will guard what is the most precious resource of our human race, our children. Such a world means a world that is not ravaged by violent conflict, disfigured by poverty, plagued by crime and repression." This was only last September. Today, all these tragedies are more horrifyingly present than ever before. No one suffers more than children. And never has that suffering been more evident than today. Every day, 40,000 children die of preventable causes. 280 a week, every week of the year. Millions more go hungry, are homeless, are orphaned, or suffer exploitation and abuse, and are maimed by war. Half of all refugees are children. By any measure, this is the greatest tragedy of our times. In my 3 years with UNICEF, I've considered myself so fortunate to be able to speak about the progress the world was making towards peace. Now I ask myself, is peace possible? Will hate and greed always exist? What I know is possible is our fulfillment of our commitment to our children. They shall have priority in times of war as in times of peace. The tragedy in the Middle East will once again count thousands of children among its innocent victims. We must and we will keep our promise to protect them, now more than ever. A renewal of the international effort to meet the needs of all children is the greatest investment the human race could make today towards a better world, towards a world of peace. Thank you.
Of a child. I would like to speak just for a little while, if I may, to share my hopes and dreams with you. I pray they will come true someday.